When Allie Turner opened that message, she was sitting at the bottom of the stairwell, her hands smelling of bleach from her weekend cleaning shift. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. The Birch Room Restaurant. Meet me at table 9. Don't be late. No name. No saved number. Just a string of unfamiliar digits. She read the message at least 4 times, as if each letter might reveal some kind of joke. She didn't know anyone who would send something like that. No one had ever asked her out before. Especially not to a place where a glass of water probably cost more than her mom made in an hour. Allie sat there for another 10 minutes, her heart drumming out a chaotic rhythm like someone was playing jazz inside her chest. Apartment 104 didn't have air conditioning, so the window was always open. Familiar sounds crept through the walls. A dog barking downstairs, the TV humming next door, and the elevator groaning like it was sighing. Allie had lived in that apartment with her mother ever since her father walked out. She'd long forgotten what it felt like to have her own bedroom. They shared everything. The bed, the bathroom, even the dreams they once had to put on hold. Her mother, Donna, worked as a housekeeper at a mid-range hotel near the airport. On days without morning shifts, she picked up extra laundry work for families in the neighborhood. As long as you don't give up, things will change, her mother always said whenever Allie felt down, or when the fridge held nothing but white bread and a bottle of ketchup nearing expiration. Allie never complained. She studied hard and earned a full scholarship to Beacon Hill Prep, a private school where most students drove luxury cars and had croissants and lattes for breakfast. And her? She drank tap water from a reused plastic bottle and ate the sandwiches her mom wrapped for her. At school, Allie learned how to blend in. She never mentioned where she lived, never talked about her mother's job, and definitely never brought up the scholarship. She was quiet, neat, and invisible in all the right ways. Until that message arrived. She didn't know what was stranger, that a stranger had asked her out to dinner, or that he'd chosen a place she'd never even dared to step into. The Birch Room, the golden-lit restaurant with thick glass doors and tablecloths pressed to perfection. A place not meant for someone like her. But something inside Allie wouldn't let her delete that message. She kept reading it over and over until she knew every word by heart. Maybe it was a prank, maybe a wrong number, or worse, a trap. But deep inside, in that small, flickering place where hope still survived, Allie thought, if I don't go, maybe I'll never be invited again in my life. That night, when her mom left for the night shift, Allie opened the closet, slowly, quietly, as if she were doing something wrong. She pulled out a simple red dress her mother had brought home from the hotel, saying it had been left behind. It was a little loose in the chest, the straps were fraying, but it was the nicest thing she owned. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusted the straps, and stared at herself for a long time. Not to see if she looked pretty, but to see if she was brave enough to walk into another world, even just for one night. In her pocket, she had exactly $5. Not enough for dinner, not enough for a taxi, not enough to fix the worn-out dress, but maybe enough to hold on to a little bit of dignity if things went as badly as she feared. Allie took her bike out of the storage room, an old one that used to belong to the neighbor boy who'd moved away last year. The handlebar still had a Go Tigers sticker from the baseball season she'd never gotten to join. A secret date, a fancy restaurant, a girl with nothing but $5 and a vague feeling that her life was about to change direction. Allie couldn't even remember the last time she'd gotten ready for a date. She always turned down school parties, pretended to be busy when classmates invited her out. But this time she set 2 alarms, spent 30 minutes in front of the mirror, and changed in and out of that red dress 4 times before deciding to just keep it on. The dress had once belonged to the daughter of the hotel owner where her mother worked. Out of style now, the fabric a little wrinkled, the neckline slightly off, but it still carried a faint trace of perfume, the kind of scent that belonged to a life Allie could only imagine. She didn't tell her mom. She didn't tell anyone. Quietly, she wiped down her old beige flats, tied her hair neatly, and combed every strand into place. She wasn't trying to be someone else. She just wanted, if someone really was waiting for her, they'd see her as she truly was. Poor, but not sloppy. Insecure, but not self-pitying. Her bike squeaked softly as she wheeled it out of the storage room. The sky had turned indigo, and the evening air was cool. Allie pedaled through familiar streets, past the small shops already closed for the night, under streetlights that flickered like sleepy eyes. She crossed the boulevard, avoiding the main road so the police wouldn't stop her for riding a bike without a rear light. Almost 30 minutes later, she stopped at the corner where the sign for the Birch Room glowed brightly against its sleek black wall. The restaurant's front looked like another world. Glass so clean it seemed unreal. Warm golden light inside, and people in polished outfits moving slowly between tables draped in crisp white linens. Allie parked her bike at a public rack, locking it with a rusty chain. She caught her reflection in a nearby car window one last time. The dress looked fine. Her mascara hadn't smudged. She pulled a handkerchief from her pocket and wiped the sweat from her palms. Her heart was pounding so fast it almost hurt to breathe. In her mind, part of her screamed to turn around right then. Don't go in. Don't make a fool of yourself. If this was some kind of joke, and it probably was, it would be better to leave quietly. She hadn't lost anything yet, just a few stains on her hem and a bit of foolish hope. But then she thought, what if it's real? What if someone actually saw her? Not out of pity, not as a prank, but because they genuinely wanted to know who she was. Such a small question, yet strong enough to make her climb the stone steps of the restaurant. Her hand trembled slightly as she pushed open the heavy wooden door. A small bell chimed, soft and velvety, completely out of sync with the frantic rhythm inside her chest. No one looked at her right away. Or maybe they did, but were too polite to show it. A host at the front desk smiled. Allie pressed her lips together, trying to appear calm. She gave the name of the person she was supposed to meet, even though in truth the message hadn't included one. Just table 9. Just a time and a smiley face. She wasn't even sure what she was hoping for. A friendly face? A guy who would look at her like she was normal, not surprised by her old dress, not smirking at her faded shoes, or maybe just a simple greeting? A kind question? She was led to table 9 near the window. No one was there. She sat down so gently the chair didn't make a sound. Her back straightened, her eyes scanned the room, not out of curiosity but because she needed to know. Was anyone watching her? She realized she was clutching her small wallet. Inside was the same crumpled $5 bill and her student ID, the one she always kept hidden. Beacon Hill Prep. The name sounded like a kingdom, but to her it was a battlefield where she fought to survive each day without revealing where she came from. The air smelled of melted butter and fresh flowers. Something in her stirred. She wasn't used to softness. Allie didn't know who she was waiting for. But the scariest part was, she was really waiting with her whole heart, fragile, excited, and quietly reminding herself that if this turned out to be a cruel joke, at least she'd had the courage to try once. She had never sat anywhere this quiet before. Not the dull kind of quiet, but the kind that made you straighten your posture, lower your voice, and think twice before moving your hands. Allie sat up straight, her palms resting on her knees, unsure where to look besides the fan-folded napkin in front of her. She'd arrived almost 15 minutes early, more than enough time to feel out of place. The hostess, a woman dressed in black with a brass name tag, smiled at her, though there was a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. The woman's gaze moved from Allie's dress to her shoes, then back up, ending with a polite nod. No one said a word, yet Allie could feel it. They were trying to follow the rules of courtesy, but also quietly wondering if someone had wandered into the wrong scene of a play. Allie didn't blame them. She was wondering the same thing herself. When the young waiter came to set the menu down, Allie carefully said, "Just a glass of water, tap please, cold if possible." She hesitated for a moment, then added softly, "No bottled water." The last part came out as a whisper. The waiter nodded, expressionless, but her stomach tightened with worry. Did they charge extra for ice here? Table 9 sat near the window, offering a clear view of the street outside, where cars moved slowly under the streetlights. Across the restaurant, near the bar, was a large table set for 4, draped in fine white linen, glassware sparkling like crystal, and plates arranged like something out of a food magazine. At that table, a middle-aged man in a dark suit was speaking in a low, steady voice, his words sprinkled with phrases like investment, partnership, and supply chain. The woman beside him, maybe his wife, maybe a colleague, kept checking her phone, and the only young man at that table was looking at no one at all. Jonas Wells sat still, one hand resting against his chin, the other holding a glass of water, his gaze fixed on table 9. That girl didn't look like anyone who usually walked into this place. The outdated red dress, her hair tied low, like she'd rushed, no heavy makeup, Her eyes moved carefully around the room, cautious, but with something deeper underneath that Jonas couldn't quite name. Maybe fear, maybe hope. Maybe both at once. He didn't know when he'd started watching her, but once he realized it, he couldn't stop. She didn't look back, at least not directly. But every now and then when she turned toward the door, her gaze brushed past his table. Quick enough to leave no trace, yet just long enough for Jonas to feel it. That strange feeling, as if he'd seen her somewhere before. Not met, but seen. A fleeting glimpse in a school hallway, or maybe at some crowded event. A face half familiar, name out of reach. A blurred presence in memory that suddenly had become sharply real. Jonas tilted his head slightly. He'd never paid attention to anyone this way before. Not at the lavish parties, not at the networking events his father forced him to attend. In those places, everyone was too confident, too polished. But this girl, she looked like she was holding herself together with sheer willpower, afraid that if she breathed too hard, she might break. The man beside him touched his shoulder lightly, pulling him back to the present. "Jonas, are you listening?" His father's voice was steady but tinged with impatience. "Yes, I am," Jonas replied, though his eyes flicked again toward table 9. "We're discussing the new integration project in the West Tech District. You need to be up to speed." "Right," Jonas said, forcing himself to turn away, but only for a few seconds. Then he glanced back. The girl was still sitting alone, her glass of water nearly untouched, her eyes still drifting toward the door every now and then. Jonas felt his throat go dry. He wasn't sure why. Allie was counting the minutes in her head, not to check the time, but to calm the rising tide of anxiety inside her. She could feel eyes on her, not just from one direction, maybe from the waiter, maybe a few curious diners, but the gaze from the table across the room, it felt different. Not pity, not judgment. It made her feel strange, not safe, but not uncomfortable either, like a familiar presence in an unfamiliar space. She took a sip of water. The glass tapped against her teeth, her hand trembling. She wasn't sure she had it in her to sit there another 10 minutes, but she didn't stand up. Because something in the air tonight, between the soft murmurs, the flicker of candlelight, and that steady gaze, was quietly asking her to stay. Allie sat still, her hands tightly clasped in her lap, listening to the sound of a spoon clinking against a glass at the next table, each note marking time like a ticking clock. 6:55. She looked toward the door every time someone walked in, then quickly pretended to study the menu, avoiding curious eyes. 7. No one showed up. She kept a small, steady smile on her face, as if waiting for someone who was definitely on their way. By 7:10, the waiter passed her table for the first time, bowing politely, though there was a trace of doubt in his eyes. Allie gave a small nod, pretending calm. "I'm still waiting for my friend," she said. Her voice trembled just slightly, but enough to sound believable. 7:20. She pulled out her phone and opened the message. Nothing. No sign that anyone was coming. She typed a short line. "I'm at table 9 now. Are you on your way?" She hit send. The screen showed delivered. No reply. Another 5 minutes passed. She tried calling. A cold, automated voice answered. "The number you have dialed is currently unavailable." The words slid through her chest like a slow, thin blade, cutting layer by layer without mercy. The waiter returned and asked softly, "Would you like to order something while you wait?" Allie looked up, her lips dry. "Not yet. Maybe in a bit," she said, managing a polite smile, the kind people wear when they're trying not to cry. The waiter nodded and stepped away quietly. She didn't watch him go. Her eyes stayed on the glass of water. The ice had completely melted. 7:40. A notification lit up her phone. Her heart jumped. She opened it quickly. It wasn't from the person who'd invited her. It was from a group chat with a few classmates, people she almost never spoke to. She tapped on it. A short video began to play. The screen showed a group of students in Beacon Hill prep uniforms sitting in a cafe, laughing loudly. One of them, Lexi Moore, the most popular girl in class, said, "Do you think she actually showed up?" Laughter erupted all around. Then someone brought the phone closer to Lexi's face. "She really thinks someone asked her out at the Birch Room. Oh my God, the maid's daughter actually believes someone could like her?" More laughter, sharp and cutting. The video ended with a scribbled message across the screen. "Enjoy your dinner, Allie Turner." No background music, just laughter. That laughter echoed in Allie's head, so loud she had to place the phone face down on the table. She sat there motionless, staring at nothing. It took her a few minutes to realize her hands were clenched so tightly her nails had left marks in her skin. A wave of nausea rose in her throat, but she forced it down. No one in the restaurant had any idea what had just happened. To them, she was just a girl who'd been stood up. A customer who couldn't afford to order. She wanted to stand up and leave right then. But if she did, they, the ones in the video, would win. They'd think they could tear her apart with a few lines of text. Allie took a deep breath. She could hear her heartbeat pounding in her chest like knocking on a door. Then she opened her wallet and pulled out the crumpled $5 bill. The waiter had just returned. She looked up, her voice hoarse but steady. "Can I get the check, please?" He blinked, surprised. "You only ordered water." "I know," she said, placing the bill on the table. "I'd like to pay for it." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded and picked up the money. "You don't have to." "I want to," Allie cut in. She couldn't let anyone think she'd come here to be pitied, not even for a glass of water. Her hand trembled as she slid her wallet back into her bag. Her fingernails scraped lightly against the worn leather. She knew the waiter was walking toward the counter, knew a few eyes had turned her way, but she kept her back straight. At the opposite table, Jonas was still watching. He saw everything. He saw the way she kept her face still even as her shoulders trembled slightly. He saw her place the money down, light but firm. He saw the waiter bow his head and walk away. Something shifted inside Jonas. Not pity, not curiosity. It was anger. A cold, invisible kind of anger, aimed at people whose names he didn't even know. He didn't understand why he cared. Maybe because she was unlike anyone he'd ever met. She didn't beg, didn't complain. She just fought to hold on to the last bit of her pride. Jonas set his glass down. He couldn't even hear his father speaking anymore. The laughter from their table faded into the hum of the restaurant, distant and dull. All that remained was the image of the girl with the $5 bill, a picture so fragile it hurt to look at. Allie stood up. The chair slid back with a soft sound, but in the quiet air it cracked like thunder. She picked up her bag, adjusted the strap of her dress, and looked around. No one said a word. No one stopped her. As Allie walked toward the door, it felt like moving through a long tunnel, each step heavier than the last. She didn't cry. She wouldn't let herself, because tears now would only make her look exactly how they wanted her to seem. Weak, pitiful. Jonas watched until the door closed behind her. In the reflection on the glass, he could still see a flicker of red from her dress under the streetlights outside. And in that moment, for the first time in his life, he realized that silence could have a sound, the sound of someone's pride struggling not to break. Jonas hadn't taken his eyes off the door when Allie disappeared into the night. The moment her red dress vanished, he stood up, as if an invisible string had pulled him to his feet. "Jonas," his father called, not loudly, but with enough weight to make everyone at the table look up. "Where are you going?" Jonas didn't answer. He walked straight to the waiter, said something quietly, then turned and headed in the opposite direction. Just a few minutes after Allie had left the restaurant's front steps, the door opened again. "Wait," Jonas said when he saw her standing on the sidewalk beside her bike. "If you leave like this, they'll think they won." Allie turned. The night wind tangled her hair, and she squinted at him as if she couldn't quite believe he was there. "Who are you?" "The only one who didn't think it was funny." Allie tightened her grip on her bag strap. "Then thanks, but I don't need anyone's pity." "It's not pity," Jonas said. "It's a reaction. There's an empty seat at my table. Come sit with me." Allie let out a small, bitter laugh. "You really think going from sitting alone to sitting next to a stranger in that place will make me any less noticeable?" "No," Jonas said, "but it'll show them you didn't fall apart." Allie started to say something, but Jonas had already turned back toward the restaurant, walking ahead, not forcing her, not waiting for an answer. Something in the way he moved made her stop. It wasn't the walk of someone showing off, not the stride of a rich guy playing the hero. It was more like someone who understood what it felt like to be left behind. She hesitated for a few seconds, then turned around and followed him. When they re-entered the restaurant, heads began to turn. Jonas pulled out the chair beside him. No grand gesture, no polite invitation, just space, open and waiting. Allie sat down slowly, her hands resting on her lap to hide the trembling. Mr. Wells set his wine glass down with a sharp clink. "What exactly is going on here?" Jonas poured himself more water. "I brought a guest. She's not on the schedule. I didn't realize I needed permission." Mr. Wells turned his gaze toward Allie. And who are you? Allie lifted her head, meeting his eyes. Allie Turner. And what are you doing here? Having dinner. Her voice was steady, not loud, not shaking. But her answer hung in the air long enough to still the whole table. The woman sitting beside Mr. Wells, his executive assistant, Margaret, turned away, pretending to check her phone. Mr. Wells gave a small, practiced smile, the kind of smile that said he could restore order to a room with just one look. "Jonas," he said calmly, "we're entertaining guests." "And I'm entertaining someone real," Jonas replied, eyes fixed on his glass of water. Mr. Wells lowered his voice. "You have no idea what you're doing. Everything at this table is about strategy, reputation, connections. This isn't the place for—" "For who, Dad?" Jonas cut in, his tone quiet but sharp. "Someone without a pedigree? Without their family name printed on the menu? Or someone who doesn't know which wine to order?" Silence. Margaret's hand tightened around her clutch. The two other guests exchanged quick glances, fumbling for a new topic. Anything to escape the tension pressing down on the table. Allie stayed silent. Her face was burning. She couldn't tell if she was witnessing an act of courage or the beginning of a family crack spreading wide open. Mr. Wells placed both hands on the table and fixed his eyes on his son. "You don't have to prove anything here. We have a position, a path, a future." "You talk like I never had a choice," Jonas said. "Like everything I do has to follow the script you wrote." Allie glanced at him. The words weren't meant for her, but she understood them too well. Dinner had shifted from negotiation to battleground, and she, the girl who only meant to have a glass of water and leave, was sitting right in the middle of it. Mr. Wells leaned back in his chair. "Your mother would never have allowed this." Jonas went rigid, a name that wasn't supposed to be spoken. "She's not here," he said, his voice dropping lower, heavier. "And you know why." Another silence fell, colder, deeper. Allie saw something flicker across Jonas's face, like a door opening just a crack. A glimpse of a boy once standing beside a hospital bed, waiting for a mother no one mentioned anymore. A teenager sitting in the front row at a funeral, quiet while his father shook hands with business partners as the casket was lowered into the ground. She recognized that look. She'd seen it before, in her own reflection. Jonas looked up. "You don't have to understand me, Dad, but you should learn to stay quiet when I'm talking to someone else." Mr. Wells gave a faint laugh, the polite kind that used to command the room. But this time, no one joined him. Under the table, Allie clasped her hands together. She should leave. This wasn't her place. But she couldn't move. Not because of Jonas, but because for the first time, she didn't feel completely alone in her loneliness. When they stepped out of the restaurant, neither of them spoke. The night wind had shifted, colder now, drier. Allie walked a few paces ahead, one hand gripping the strap of her bag as if it were the last thing keeping her steady. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to get away, as far as possible. Jonas followed a few steps behind, not rushing, but never letting her out of sight. He wasn't used to this feeling, silence, uncertainty, and fear. Not fear of her, but fear of what she might say next. "Let me call you a ride," Jonas finally said when he saw her stop under a streetlight. Allie turned to him. "You really think I'm getting in a car with you after what just happened?" Jonas frowned. "I meant, you think what you did back there was good for me?" Her voice rose, cracking through the calm she'd been holding on to. "You dragged me into your father's business dinner, sat me down like a statement, like a declaration of war. You think I wanted to be seen like that?" Jonas took a step back. You just wanted to feel like a good person," Allie cut him off. "You wanted to fix something. Not for me, for yourself." "That's not true." "Yes, it is." Her voice shook now, but she didn't stop. "You saw me being humiliated and suddenly you had to do something. Because if you didn't, you'd be the same as before, wouldn't you?" Jonas stood still. She had just hit the deepest part of him. Allie held her breath. "You don't know anything about me. Don't use me to fix whatever guilt you're carrying." He swallowed hard. The wind ruffled his hair, but he didn't reach to smooth it down. "My mom," he said quietly, "was a piano teacher. Not rich, not famous. She didn't fit into my father's world, and everyone knew it." Allie said nothing. "One time when I was little, my dad took her to a fundraising gala. She wore a sky blue dress she'd sewn herself. She thought it was beautiful, and I did too." Jonas paused, his eyes locked on hers. But people laughed, not out loud, just the kind of laughter you can feel. One woman came up, touched the fabric, and asked, "Is it a custom design?" Then she walked away with a smile my mother never forgot. Allie felt her chest tighten. That night, she went home early. She didn't say a word. But after that, she never went to another event again. And when she died, that same blue dress was still in her closet, folded neatly like it had never been worn. Jonas's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I didn't do anything when it happened. I just stood there. I was just a kid, but I knew. I saw, and I did nothing. They both stood still under the pale yellow streetlight. Neither spoke for several seconds. No cars, no voices, just truth. Quiet and heavy between them. I don't need anyone to stand up for me, Allie said slowly. I don't need to be saved, especially not when it comes too late. Jonas gave a small nod, offering no argument, but his eyes stayed on her, holding her in that silence as if trying to say the one thing words never could. I paid for the water, Allie said. I stood up and walked out, on my own. You can see me. You can be angry for me, but you don't get to take that moment away from me. Jonas opened his mouth, then closed it again. He understood. Not every wound needed someone to heal it. Some pain only faded when you walk through it yourself, with no hand to hold, no one standing beside you. So, what do you want me to do? He asked quietly. Allie shook her head. Nothing. Just don't follow me anymore. She turned and walked to her old bike, unlocking it like she was opening a door back into the real world, the one she understood. The world with no accidental heroes, where people survived by standing up from the ground they'd been pushed onto. Jonas watched her go, not moving, not calling out, and for the first time in his life, he let someone leave without trying to pull them back. Allie got on her bike, her hands still trembling, but her eyes steady, resolute. Jonas stood a few steps behind her, as if hoping something might change in the final second. Allie, he called. Wait. She turned. The streetlight caught her eyes, reflecting a calm that couldn't be shaken. I told you. Don't follow me. I'm not following. Jonas, she interrupted, not loud but clear. Tonight's been long enough. I don't need another kind word. Jonas said nothing. She wasn't angry. She was just tired. And somehow that hurt more. She turned back and started to pedal away. The bike clattered softly over the uneven cobblestone, the sound small but steady. The wind stung her face, sharp and cold, yet for the first time she didn't feel empty. Each turn of the wheel was a breath taken back. Each street that fell behind her carried away the stares, the laughter, and the nameless invitation that had brought her here in the first place. She didn't cry. Not anymore. She just let herself think. About her mother, about the third-floor apartment with the jammed window, about those swollen red hands burned by cleaning chemicals, still cooking dinner even when too tired to stand. Allie remembered the night her mom sat sewing the torn hem of the old red dress. She hadn't asked where Allie planned to wear it. She'd only said one thing. Be careful with the side zipper. It comes loose easily. Her mother's love was never loud. It was quiet, steady, like the handkerchief she always tucked into Allie's coat pocket on nights when the cold came without warning. She thought about the evenings she'd spent bent over her books while the whole neighborhood faded into the hum of old TVs, about the mornings she skipped breakfast to save money for printing her essays, not because she wanted to be accepted, but because she wanted to stand tall, without bowing her head. And that's what she was doing now. Right now. As she pedaled through the streets most of her classmates only ever saw through car windows. Jonas stayed where he was, on the edge of the sidewalk where she'd just left him. He had never seen anyone walk away from him before. Never been rejected so completely, so unmistakably, with no room left for rescue or return. The wind pushed the loose strands of hair across his forehead. Inside, his emotions tangled together. Disappointment, frustration, something like regret, but too faint to name. It felt, for the first time, like someone had stepped out of his story, out of his frame, without needing him to play a part in theirs. Footsteps sounded behind him. Mr. Wells appeared, hands in his pockets, his face as calm as if nothing had happened. So this is the kind of woman you're going after? He asked, half mocking, half disdainful. She turned you down in front of everyone, and you're still standing here like a lost child. Jonas didn't answer. He just looked at his father. Really looked at him, for the first time, not as a son waiting to be acknowledged, but as a man who no longer needed to be. She's nobody, Mr. Wells went on, his tone flat, measured. A poor girl living off a scholarship, walking into a place she doesn't belong with $5 in her pocket. Is that really worth risking your reputation for? Jonas met his father's eyes. The wind brushed past his shoulders, but it couldn't move the stillness in his face. Do you really think you still know what's worth anything? He asked quietly. Mr. Wells frowned. Watch your tone. I'm not being disrespectful, Jonas said evenly. I'm just realizing something. You're not angry because of who she is. You're angry because you couldn't control how I reacted to her. Mr. Wells took a step closer. Be careful how you speak to me. I've been careful for over 10 years, Jonas replied. And what did that get me? A father who can't even look at his son without calculating what it might do to the company's stock value. The air went still. Mr. Wells clenched his jaw but said nothing. Jonas turned his head, looking in the direction where Allie had disappeared. In that silence, between two men who shared a name but nothing else, Jonas understood something he'd never dared to before. He was different, and he would never be like his father. Not in how he lived, not in how he saw people. And for the first time in his life, being rejected felt like relief. Because this time, he'd chosen the right person not to hold on to. Monday morning, the campus buzzed with its usual noise. But when Allie pedaled through the gate, time seemed to slow. She knew. Everyone already knew. The texts, the video, the whispers. She was the story of the weekend. Still, her steps didn't falter. She parked her bike, swung her backpack over one shoulder, took a deep breath, and walked into the main hall as if nothing had happened. Her head high, her back straight, her eyes steady. Every step she took spoke one silent truth. I'm not ashamed of who I am. The crowded hallway seemed to part for her as she walked through. Eyes followed. Whispers spread. A few people covered their mouths to hide giggles. And then, someone's voice cut through, loud enough to make sure everyone heard. Wow, she actually showed up. Allie stopped. A group of the school's wealthy students stood leaning against the lockers, led by Madison Blake, daughter of a famous fashion designer. Beside her were Tyler, Brielle, and the other familiar faces from that weekend's video. Allie, such a shame that date didn't turn out like a dream, huh? Madison said, smirking. Next time you want a seat at the Birch Room, maybe try applying as a waitress instead. Laughter erupted, sharp and deliberate, slicing through the hallway like a blade. But before Allie could say a word, another voice rang out. Clear, cold, and commanding. Shut up, Madison. Everyone turned. Jonas stood at the end of the hallway, backpack slung loosely over one shoulder, his face calm, but his eyes sharp as glass. He walked forward, slow and steady, cutting through the space until he stood between the two sides. The hallway fell silent. I saw you, he said, his voice low but carrying, laughing at her, posting that video, playing your little entertainment games. He looked at each of them in turn, Madison, Tyler, Brielle, every name that had been part of the cruelty. And I also saw her sitting alone, back straight, holding on to her pride, something not everyone here seems to have. Jonas. Madison tried to laugh, the sound brittle. You're overreacting. No, he said, stepping closer. You are. Because you can't stand a girl who doesn't live in a mansion but still walks past you with her head up. His voice hardened. Money doesn't give you the right to humiliate someone, and if you need to tear someone down just to feel taller, that only proves how weak you really are. Madison's face drained of color. Tyler looked down at his shoes. No one dared to laugh. Silence. Then, unexpectedly, Brielle, who had shared the video herself, had stepped out from the group and slowly walked toward Allie. Brielle, the girl known for her coldness, the one who never cared what anyone thought, looked smaller somehow. About that night, she murmured, I laughed too, but this morning, I looked in the mirror and I hated what I saw. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. Allie looked at her, said nothing, just gave a small nod. No smile, no attempt to make it right, but enough to forgive. Then she turned and kept walking toward her locker. The crowd parted, quietly making space for her. She opened the locker, took out her books. Behind her, not a single mocking word followed. Jonas stood still in the middle of the hallway. He didn't move closer, didn't call out. He just watched her go. And for the first time in his life, he didn't try to explain or fix anything. Because he finally understood. She didn't need saving. She just needed to be left alone. To live on her own terms. Allie rode out through the school gate just as the sun began to set. She pedaled down the familiar streets, the wind playing through her hair, brushing against the faded hem of her uniform. Across her back, the late sunlight painted a warm streak of gold. And inside her pocket, the same $5 bill was still there, untouched. Not because she couldn't spend it, but because she'd never sold her pride for anything. Some apologies come too late. But what truly matters is how you manage to stand before they ever arrive. Allie didn't need anyone to speak for her, but she deserved to be seen, to be respected. What about you? If you've ever been hurt because of where you came from, or because you were different, did you choose to stand up or stay silent? Share your story below. And don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt stories that reach deeper than words. Thank you for staying with us until the end.